After taking a single zero at my grandparents' house, my dad was back at it. He dropped off on the PCT where it crossed Highway 58. He signed the obligatory trail log before following the highway around 2 miles. As he walked with the cars and trucks whizzing past him on the freeway, he had no idea what awaited him. As soon as he started gaining elevation above Tehachapi, the wind started battering him. At their worst, the winds were between 90 and 100 miles per hour. The winds were rushing up the hill, or he would have never made progress. It made climbing dangerous. Rarely would his feet land where they were supposed to. For the most part, the winds were pushing him against the mountain instead of down a dangerous fall. The cliff bordered the left side switchbacks for a while, and those were dangerous to navigate. At times, he had to crawl. At about 6 miles in, the winds finally settled down to be merely annoying. The windmills kept him company until he reached the first and last water source for the day. A water source where he met Michelle from Michigan, or Eminem. She had already filled water and had lunch and was heading out. My dad had no idea how far back into the mountains the windmills went this stretch of the trail. The other surprising thing was the amount of infrastructure necessary to build and maintain them. There is a whole network of well-maintained roads crisscrossing across the mountains. After a 21-mile day, he set up camp at a tent site big enough to tuck 3 tents in between the scrub brush and small trees. Because of the noise of the wind and the nearby windmills, he had no idea he shared the site with 2 other hikers. My dad literally woke up in the shadow of a windmill. Later that day, he ran into Eminem a couple of times, but never crossed paths with her again. Sometime after mile marker 600, he ran into the 3rd occupant of the tent site, where he was admiring an interesting sign. They walked and talked together for a while before they introduced themselves. My dad commented about that was weird. His walking companion was the second Bruno he met. That was when he realized they had met before at Hikertown. They had shared the van ride to market. They both took off their hats and glasses and confirmed. My dad was amused about meeting Bruno from Brooklyn and Michelle from Michigan on the same day, but Bruno did not want to be called B&B. Impressively, Bruno hiked from Willow Springs Road the day before. So while my dad hiked 21 miles, Bruno had hiked 29. They had made plans to camp at the same place that night. It was a proper campsite with a water source, pit, toilets, and fire rings. As the day dragged on, it got cold. My dad had no idea how cold until he tried to sign a trail log, but all he could manage was large, crude block letters. So he wore his jacket for the last bit before camp. My dad trying to maintain a fire while he made dinner and set up his tent. The wood was wet and the ground was wet. The only thing that seemed to burn were pine needles, and it was too much work feeding new needles into the fire constantly. By the time Bruno showed up, used the facilities, had dinner, and set his own tent, the fire was out, so no hangout time. The campsite had the last reliable water source for 35 miles. This was the longest stretch on the entire PCT. Fortunately, a trail angle called Devilfish stocks water caches at 2 road crossings. At the first road crossing, Kelos Road, Bruno caught up to my dad and they chatted a bit. They both decided to camp at the second water cache, Bird Springs Pass. One feature of the cache that my dad apparently appreciated was that Devilfish provides battery packs with the water so one can recharge their devices. During the day, they passed through motorcycles and tortoise habitats. Just one more day of hiking before Walker Pass. My grandfather had agreed to drive Bruno back to Cajon Pass when he resupplied my dad that evening, so Bruno and my dad walked together all day. They had lunch at McIver's cabin. Apparently it was a popular stopping spot for off-roaders. When my dad arrived, a huge group of ATVs, side-by-sides, and motorcycles were parked there. Bruno and my dad enjoyed lunch with the Riders Under the Sun, a Christian off-roading group. My dad's group and the off-roaders were very different, so they had a lot of questions for each other. Bruno and my dad even got some trail magic, fresh fruit and some cookies. Just 7 miles after the lunch was a surprise right before Walker Pass. My grandfather brought Taco Bell as well as my dad's resupplies and needs. The 3 of them sat at a Walker Pass campground and had a lovely evening picnic. After a quick visit, Bruno and my grandfather were off. Bruno was planning on filling in some of his missed miles by hiking to Cajon Pass towards Big Bear. As they were gone, my dad enjoyed the sunset through his tent flap. Snake count to less than a mile from Walker Pass, my dad stumbled upon a southwest speckled rattlesnake, his 28th trail day and his first rattlesnake encounter. Trail stop checklist: Highway 58 to Apache check, and Walker Pass check.